Some of it has to do with the language in which economics came to be expressed after World War II. So the emphasis on formal equilibrium modeling, mathematical modeling of equilibrium conditions. You know, in a sort of Walrasian general equilibrium state where all resources are by hypothesis already allocated to their highest valued uses, there is no role for the entrepreneur to play. There's no need for an entrepreneur. There is no entrepreneurship is assumed away by definition. Now, Mises, of course, as many of you know, also employed a kind of general equilibrium construct, what he called the evenly rotating economy. But Mises used this construct only in a very specific and limited sense for a rather narrow purpose. He did not analyze the evenly rotating economy as the basic means of explaining market phenomena. By contrast, within mainstream neoclassical economics, formal equilibrium models are the standard tools that are used to explain all kinds of everyday economic phenomena. So if you use a formal equilibrium model, a mathematical equilibrium model, to analyze things in economics, why would you need to consider the entrepreneur? Why would you need to bring the entrepreneur into your analysis? You wouldn't. In microeconomic theory, the sort of central role played by the model of perfect competition, so-called perfect competition, and many of you have studied this in school, right? Infinitely small buyers and sellers, price takers, none of whom has any influence on prices, quantities, and so on. Again, this is a completely static model in which entrepreneurship is assumed not to exist. Okay? Now, within the last few years, 10 years, 15 years maybe, there has been a little bit of new interest in entrepreneurship within some fields of mainstream economics. There's a literature on innovation in which entrepreneurship is occasionally invoked, maybe as a synonym for innovator or innovation. In some of the economic development literature, there's a sense that maybe a way to foster sustainable economic growth is not to have the World Bank and USAID and the IMF, give money to state planners to build roads and dams, but maybe to try to foster a culture in which many individuals in the community will engage in entrepreneurial activity and have some sort of bottom-up development rather than top-down development. But again, even in those literatures, entrepreneurship is, the mainstream practitioners are a little uncomfortable with the concept. They sense that it is somehow important, but they don't quite know how to handle it. Now, the Austrian school, of course, is quite different in this regard. The Austrians have always given central importance to the entrepreneur in their theories, in their models of economic activity. Cantillon, I already mentioned, could be considered a sort of proto-Austrian or pre-Austrian thinker. Karl Menger, while not explaining entrepreneurship in as much detail as some later Austrians would do, nonetheless explains very clearly that that the entrepreneur is the force that is responsible, the agent responsible for allocating resources, for organizing production in a market economy. The writers, sometimes known as the Anglo-American Austrians, so writers in Britain and in the US, such as Frank Fetter, Herbert Davenport, Philip Wicksteed, to some extent John Bates Clark, provided some very fundamental analysis of the entrepreneur as a central agent in their theories of market competition and economic production. Mises, of course, devotes a lot of attention in his works, Human Action in particular, to entrepreneurship and the role of the entrepreneur. I'll discuss in just a few moments in a little bit more detail how I see Mises' conception of the entrepreneur. Murray Rothbard as well discusses entrepreneurship in great detail in Man, Economy, and State and in other works. Israel Kirzner, who was mentioned this morning, is a more recent specialist in entrepreneurship from an Austrian perspective, a sort of unique Austrian perspective. Also the less well-known 20th century economist Ludwig Lachmann, who became better known by modern Austrians for his epistemological writings, but whose most important contributions, I think, are in his development of Austrian capital theory. Discusses the entrepreneur has very important insights on entrepreneurship in his 1956 book, Capital and Its Structure. Mises puts it as follows. Mises says, "It is impossible to eliminate the entrepreneur from the picture of a market economy. The various complementary factors of production cannot come together spontaneously. They need to be combined by the purposive efforts of men aiming at certain ends and motivated by the urge to improve their state of satisfaction." Right? That's the definition of purposeful human action, according to Mises. In eliminating the entrepreneur, one eliminates the driving force of the whole market system. In eliminating the entrepreneur, one eliminates the driving force of the market. You might have heard this phrase before, entrepreneurship as the driving force of the market. What does Mises have in mind with that term? He has in mind the agent that brings together the complementary factors of production, combining them in purposeful ways to achieve particular ends, namely, in a catalactic context, to make money, to earn money revenues that are in excess of money costs or expenditures. So, a little bit more detail about Mises and how Mises treats entrepreneurship. Again, there's sort of a more general or fundamental aspect of entrepreneurship, and then a more narrow and specific aspect of market or business or catalactic entrepreneurship. Well, as was already discussed this morning, and as most of you know, Carl Menger's analysis of economic process and economic behavior was different from that of his neoclassical contemporaries, such as Jevons and Walras, in that Menger was an Aristotelian. He emphasized causal relations and stressed that economics was ultimately the study of means and ends. That economic action is about the employment of scarce means to achieve specific ends. However, as was also discussed this morning, when one introduces time and uncertainty into the analysis, we recognize that the human actor, in assembling resources, in choosing among means to attain specific ends, does not know with certainty that those ends will in fact be realized. There's an investment. The investment may pay off. Maybe it doesn't pay off. So all of you who are attending this workshop, this seminar today, it cost you some money, registration fees, maybe transportation costs or accommodation costs to come here to Porto Alegre. There's an investment of your time. You could be doing something else this morning instead of coming here. So you have made some expenditures up front. Why do you do it? Because you hope that you will receive a huge benefit, a subjective benefit, learning new information, improving your understanding of the Austrian tradition, seeing famous celebrity professors, making new friends, networking, improving your networking, and so on. These are all benefits which you hope to achieve, and it's certainly the goal of the organizers and the speakers that when you go home tomorrow, you will be very, very satisfied, and you will in your own subjective assessment, the benefits that you have received will be much more valuable than what you sacrificed to come. Now, it's possible, extremely unlikely, but theoretically possible, that you might go home disappointed and say, what a waste of time and money. Those guys were terrible. I couldn't understand anything that they said. Klein had a mistake on his PowerPoint, and it ruined the whole thing. And then we would say you've earned a loss, right? So my point is, you are acting as entrepreneurs in a sense that you have employed scarce means to achieve particular ends, but there's some uncertainty because of the passage of time. The ends, you will not know if you have satisfied your ends until the future, at which point the means have already been used, the expenditures have already been made. So entrepreneurship can be successful, it can earn a profit, a money profit or a subjective psychic profit, or it can be unsuccessful, it can earn a loss. So as Mises puts it, the term entrepreneur as used by economic theory means acting man seen exclusively seen from the aspect of the uncertainty inherent in every action. So human action, all purposeful human action, includes a measure of entrepreneurship. However, there's also a more sort of a narrow kind of catalactic or market or business entrepreneurship that is especially important in our study of markets and economic processes. So Mises and Austrian economic theory emphasize that the entrepreneur performs a distinct economic function. So we may think of different actors, different agents in a market economy performing different roles. So think of sort of ideal types, Weberian ideal types. We have laborers who exchange labor services for payments, wages and salaries. We have landowners who rent the use of their land in exchange for payments, rental payments. We have capitalists who own financial resources and make those available in advance to borrowers in exchange for payments, interest payments on the use of those resources. But we have another category of actor, the entrepreneurs, the returns to which are economic profit and economic loss. So the businessman rents some land and he hires some workers, he borrows some money, he produces some goods and services, he sells them on the market. If the receipts that he receives from selling his goods and services on the market are greater than the amount of money he has spent on wages and rents and interest, then controlling for discounting and time preference, if he has more left over, then he has a profit. The profit is the extra revenues that are in excess of his economic costs, taking the time value of money into account. If he is unable to sell his goods and services as much as he expected, or he cannot charge as high a price as he wanted, maybe he ends up with a smaller amount of money as revenues than he spent in costs, he has an economic loss. So profit and loss, if you like, are the returns or the rewards to the exercise of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs earn either profit or loss, while laborers earn wages, landowners earn rent, capitalists earn interest.